Okay, and we are all set. So you can start the session, sir.
Yeah, thanks, Vikas, for a nice introduction on data architect versus data engineering. So, hey, hi, good evening, everyone. So, my name is Jugani, and I'm principal data architect at Roche, Pune. So, just about a brief for the Roche. So, Roche is a leading pharmaceutical company. So, we have units for the diabetes and the pharmaceutical, and Roche is based at the Basel. So, it's a leading company in the healthcare domain, and it is having its own digital center of excellence at Pune, India. So, today's agenda will be introduction to the topics like data architect versus data engineering, and what exactly is the data architect, and what are the roles and responsibilities of a data architect, and what exactly is a data engineering, and what are the roles and responsibilities of data engineering, and what exactly are the differences between these two designations and the positions. And in the end, we will be having a conclusion on the career part, from where exactly we need to start for the data architect and data engineering. And in the end, we will be having a QA session. So a brief about me. So my name is Jugani, and I am a principal data architect at Roche Pune. So total 13 years of experience I have, and I have worked on different technologies in the domain in my 13 years of experience. So as I have mentioned about that I have a architect and engineering skills on the data side, and apart from that, I have experience on ML ops side and the machine learning, as well as data ops, DevOps. Also, I have vast experience on the software engineering part, and I have developed a lot of applications on top of that before like going into the data architect role. And I was developing those software engineering products onto the cloud. So where exactly my interest got raised on the data side, and I have started gathering the information and the knowledge and my upgrade of the skills on the engineering side, the data, and eventually got the nice projects and the nice experience on the cloud data part, from where the whole career got evolved into the data architect. And sorry, and for the hobbies part, so I'm a very like enthusiast on the sports side. So I play cricket, badminton, chess, and I love to like socialize with the people, because the socializing is very important. So when we do networking, so we got to know about different opportunities in the world, and definitely we got to know about different people. So it is always good if we are in a professional careers. So always we need to do the socializing, and that is the main thing where exactly we build our soft skills, how to like talk to people and analyze their behavior, because it always help ourselves to grow into the career path. So it's more all about so gaining the technical skill, as well as uh, like gaining the soft skills also. Yeah. So coming back to the topic, so we will know what exactly the roles and responsibilities and the definition of a data architect over here. So what exactly is a data architect? So a data architect is responsible for formulating the organizational data strategy and defining the data management standards and principles on which the organization operates. So what exactly it mean? So so there are different, suppose I need to take an example. So there are different cloud, and there are different databases. So which database I need to select, and which cloud I need to select, and where exactly my whole data product will lie. So there are different use cases. First, we need to set the requirement for ourselves. So our product and the requirement of that. And accordingly, we need to define the use case for that. And we need to evaluate the databases, right? So where exactly our data gonna store and how exactly our data will land over there. So there will be different stages of your data. So as a simple example, if I take, so we will be extracting the data, and once the data is extracted, so we will be having some cleaning of the data. We need to enrich the data, and on top of that, we need to transform the data in the desired format what we want as a business use case. So once all of these things will be done, we want to save the data in some way. And that is what exactly the database is all about. And if all these things is happening on the database, so we need to define the database in such a manner that these things will be optimized for us. It is not a like the time consuming thing. So we need to be very on top of analyzing all of these things before we go before we go for the implementation. So data architects design the data blueprint that other data consumers follow and implement. So as an architect, we need to define the whole strategy, right? So we need to build the building blocks for this whole data pipelines. And the data architect create the organization's logical and physical data assets and set the data policies based on company requirement. So the company requirement is the business requirement of the company. So what exactly we want our data, like from our data. So what exactly is the use case of the data? So in the end, if I am a data scientist, right, and I need to use the data, so it should be formalized and standardized to use for me. If I'm going to because as a data scientist, I mostly need to focus on the business use case of that data. I don't want to deal with the extraction and the cleaning and refining of the data, the wrangling of the data, and all those parts. So for a data architect, it should be like all the data should be easily available for the business use cases. So we need to define all of those things as an architect. So what are the responsibilities of the data architect? So the data architect primarily responsibility revolves around providing deep technical expertise for designing, creating, managing, and deploying large-scale data systems in the organization. So the data architect responsibilities include designing, developing, implementing, and translating business requirements and the overall organizational data strategy, including standards, principles, data sources, storage, pipelines, data flow, and data security policies. So over here we have mostly talked about the data extraction, the transformation, and saving the data. So over here, one interesting topic also comes as a data security policies. So when we are doing all of these things, like the extracting the data, transforming, and the saving, so there will be a lot of flow of the data, and it might be data is flowing from one environment to another. It might be data is somewhere at rest. So at rest means the in between stages where we are saving the data. So we need to make sure we are not breaching the data. So the PHI data means we have the information of the users, right? So we have the name, it might be the age, what kind of a diseases in the historical part the client have. So what kind of a medicine he's taking and what zone and all of these informations we have.
So,
So
sorry to interrupt, but screen got unshared for. You need to share screen again.
okay, okay, I think it got live streamed again. Let me share it. Is it visible now?
Yes, it's visible.
Okay, thanks. So over here, we need to make sure the data is secured enough in all of these stages. And we also need to make sure the data is non-identifiable. So we need to like have some kind of a policies where we, if we want to know the data, so we cannot. So the data should be very encrypted format over here for the PHI and also into the financial domain. So these kind of a thing we need to make sure as an architect also, because if data is getting breached out and it is not a secured one, so anything anything can be happen with your data, and it can be go outside of your organization, and that is not at all good for the organization and for the product. So the collaborating with the data engineers, data scientists, and other stakeholders to execute the data strategy. So as an architect, we need to make sure that we are aligned with the business, and we need to make sure that we are aligned with the skills what we have with our data engineers, and what exactly is the business use case and the formats data scientists want the data to be in. And if we are having other stakeholders, then we need to make sure that we are aligned with all of them and we are on the same page before we apply a data strategy for the product. So the communicating and defining the data architecture patterns in the organization that guide the data framework. So when we are defining a data framework, so it is not about a product. It can be your organization is having some kind of a vision. So in the previous, we have the ETLs, and there will be the historical approaches of the data pipelines. And as world is getting evolved, right? So there are different clouds which are coming into the picture. Now, on the different clouds, we are having different data services. So GCP have its own, AWS, Azure have their own data services. Now for our use case, what kind of a data service is best to use? So we should be very upgraded into those formats and skills part, so we can define the data strategy and the data framework for our organization vision. So leading the data teams to develop secure, scalable, high performance and reliable big data and analytics software and services. So when we say we need to develop a secure, scalable, and a high performance and reliable big data platform. So what exactly it means is, so whenever we are defining a data pipeline and a framework, so it should be a secure one in terms of the data. And for us, it might be we are having some kind of a gigabyte of data right now, but if client we add more clients into our product, now the data flow will be more. So how exactly we can scale our platform to add more clients? So our whole design should be around that. We should have a think on these terms. So we cannot have, okay, so we need to think over it again, how exactly we can scale our platform, the data platform for the new clients. It should be when we are designing the whole system, right? And how, if we have a historical system and we got a task to have a scalability pattern into that, then definitely there will be different angles into that and how exactly we can fit the scalability part for that particular product. which was in the silos as a historical software engineering process have most of the systems are not more scalable. So definitely we need to think on those part. But if we are defining right now, so we need to be very sure that the system should be scalable enough and the high performance. Now, when we are talking about the high performance, so in the data world, most of us are using the Android phones, right? And if the information flow is not into the seconds or the like the same framework or the millisecond part, right? So it is like we are losing out somewhere. So if the information is not flowing to us as soon as possible, so we are mostly out of the system or the world right now, because the performance part is the topmost priority in the data part, in the data world itself. So whenever we are processing the data, it should be available as soon as possible. The analytics on top of that. If we are having some kind of a models, the machine learning models, we should be able to trace that. So if I need to take an example, right? So so many of us will be using the credit cards. So if some online transaction happen on my credit card, right, and that can be a fraud one, and if my learning algorithm is not able to identify that fraud transaction into some seconds, right? Or suppose say in 5 minutes, right? Then what is the use of machine learning algorithm, right? Because I need to sense that my card is like compromised, and I need to report to the bank again. If this is happening like 24 hours, then I will get to know, okay, my card is compromised, and in that 24 hours, a lot of transaction happen, right? So it might be my whole card money is used. So it is very important right now in the data world that the performance should be very high. So whatever we are building on the data, we need the data as soon as possible so we can do some kind of analytics on top of that. If you want to do machine learning, if you want to sense the data, what exactly happened to the data, it should be available to us, right? And that is how we can build the products on the data part. So there are always the two type of a data. It might be a historical data or a live transaction data. So it all depends on the use case, how exactly or the feature you want to have into your product, right? So what kind of a skills do data architects have? So data architects needs a combination of technical and soft skills to thrive. Typically, data architects start in other data roles such as data scientist, data analyst, or data engineer, and work their way up to becoming a data architect. So it's more about the experience on the data modeling, data design, and the data management. Because when we start from the data engineering or a data scientist or analytical group, so we understand the data, and in this whole part, understanding the data is more important. So how exactly you understand the data, how you deal with the data, and what exactly you want from the data. So that understanding is more important over here. And as the experience grow, so you have a thorough knowledge on the system, how exactly the system is designed, and where we can optimize it, right? And what are the other tools and the services we can implement into the whole system where we can get the value, right? So it is more about the experience in the architect part, right? So definitely you need to have more knowledge of the system and the skills what you need to have as a the data engineer or a scientist or an analytics. So there are different tools for analyst part and all those parts. So we will not be talking more into those parts. So we will be focusing on the architect as well as and on the engineering part. So on the architect part, so the data modeling, what are the different techniques of data modeling, the integration and the design and the data management part. So when we need to define a data model or we need to define a database, so definitely the experience as well as the knowledge of the design and the data management and the modeling part will come into the picture. And we should be having knowledge of different databases and the operating systems over here. So having a knowledge of different databases will definitely help us evaluating the different databases as per our use cases. So some so when we say as per the use cases, it's not more about the performance. Definitely the product needs the performance, but it is also part. So how exactly the use case we have, what kind of a data we have, what size of data we have, and in the future, again, what kind of the use cases we want to have into the product, right? So we should be having the knowledge over there. So in that way, we can define the databases and the data architecture part. So the data flow. Suppose I will take an example of AWS. So in AWS, there are different like services for the data. So what kind of a services we need to integrate? So if we need to just extract the data, so what will be a good service to implement for the extracting? What will be its cost over the data? Will be it a cheaper or any other service will be more cheaper than that? And in which format we are going to consume the data? So once this service gets the data, what will be the next step, right? Because there will be a different parts into this whole pipeline when we will be extracting the data. So definitely some of the cases we will be having a continuous data, but in it might be in some of the cases there will be a window where we will be extracting the data from that window, right? So we need to check for which use case what will be the best service for us. So as right now we are in a serverless the whole world, right? So we want our service to be more serverless on the cloud. So definitely we will be looking at those part. We don't want our service to be up and running for 24 by 7 if we are not using. Definitely if the use case says your service needs to be up 24 by 7, we will define the service in that way. But if I'm taking an example of a use case, there is a certain window where we need to fetch the data. So we don't want a service to be running the whole 24 hours. It's just for 2 to 3 hours that service needs to be up, has the data and do all of the process part of the data, if we say the ETL part, and get the data available for other use cases. So definitely I don't want uh, the I want this service to be just in that fashion. It just needs to be scheduled and up and running for 3 hours, do its job and close it out, because I am saving my 20 or 21 hours of delay. So definitely we need to have a knowledge of all the cloud services and the data security and the governance part. So the data security and governance part is the most like topic and the common topic where will find the breaches happen. So because whenever we are building the whole data platform on the data modeling and the data pipelines, so there will be different aspects of that. So just it's not about the data part. It is a very common example I am taking, like suppose log 4j. So there is a vulnerability into the log 4j. And if suppose I am writing some kind of a wrapper for my or some kind of a logic into the Java to data extract and the ETL pipe to load the data to different stages of my data journey. And I have the logging mechanism with the log 4j, and it have the vulnerability around that, right? So apart from data, I also need to know what I am implementing, right, as an architect. So if I am having some kind of a module or technology in which there are more vulnerabilities, and I am open to world to get my data shared across, and that is not a good use case and a good technology part. So we should be very aware about what is happening in the world on the security and the governance part of our data, and on as well as on the software engineering of those tools what we are going to use. So we need to be very alert over here. And the last topic is more about, as I have said, so we need to be more socialized when we are working into the professional environment, right? So the communication and the leadership are the very the role playing things in your whole career. So if you cannot communicate well to the other person, so you will not be able to explain what exactly you want to say. So suppose i I am having some kind of a challenges in my task, right? But I am not able to explain all of these challenges to the other person with whom I need to communicate and get things resolved, right? So it will be to and fro, a lot of to and fro, and it might be will be wasting a lot of time for just simple things. So we should be very vocal about these things, and we need to work on our soft skills. And as we move into the ladder for the data architect's role, so it's not about you are building some blocks, you are defining the services, and your job is done. You will be the data leaders of the organization, right? So you will be leading the whole data vision of the organization. So you need to be a leader, right? It's not about the managerial role we are talking about, but if you are not able to convince other people why you are using a particular service, why you are using a particular database, why you have used this flow, then you will not be able to convince and implement those things into your whole organization journey and the data journey. Then what will be the use of whole knowledge what you have? So you need to be very vocal. You need to work on your soft skills and as well as on the leadership skills. So uh, it was more about the data architect part. Now we will be covering the data engineering part. So what exactly is a data engineering? So we have talked about the building blocks for the data architects. Now I have, as an architect, I have defined a nice building design, right? So the building looks like this. It have more features, the fire security, the water problem is, we have solved everything. We have an escalator, we have a stairs if in case there is a hazard part, right? And we have a nice parking. People can easily flow to their floors from the parking. So we have designed everything. Now who is going to build this whole building, right? So over there in this whole definition, the main part comes into the data engineering. So the data engineer is responsible for designing, maintaining, and optimizing the data infrastructure for data collecting, management, transformation, and access part. So once the definition is done, now we need to build the whole platform, right? We need to maintain the things. And if anything comes into the picture as an concern over here, then again we need to solve all of these problems. So the data engineer comes into this whole part. The data engineers create pipelines that convert raw data into usable formats for data scientists and other data consumer to utilize. So there is a little difference between the data architect and data engineering. So data architect have defined these pipelines, Now data engineer needs to build these pipelines. So suppose as a data architect, I have said I need to use this AWS service to extract the data, but someone needs to write the whole code, right? As an architect, I have evaluated this service. I have done a kind of a POC, but the productionized code needs to be written. So that is the role of data engineer. So the data engineer role evolved to handle the core data aspects of software engineering and the data science. They use software engineering principles to develop algorithm that automates the data flow process. So we all are coming from a like software engineering background, right? And we know some of the languages in the trend. Definitely, we have a Python. So if I need to write something on the data part, right? So definitely we will be using the Python. So over here, I want to explain, that's what I want to explain about the software engineering principles. So when we are writing a code, definitely we will be using the OOPS concept, right? So we will be defining some of the classes that can be reusable. We will be writing some of the unit cases of the data. So the whole thing of the pipeline part, so we need to write some codes over there, and it is a kind of a automated system for the data flow. So we need to do that apart from the sequels also. So in the data, when we are defining all of these things, we might have some of the transformations of the data apart from the whole normal software engineering coding part. So over there, we might need to define the sequence. So as a data engineer in the today's era, it will always good to be on top of SQL, the database part, as well as on the software engineering part. So as a developer or a data engineer, you should know some of the languages, either Java or Python. So I will be suggesting Python on top of it, like the Java. So definitely Java is there always, but as a trend is going on, so there are different packages, and the whole community is more strong over here, and you will be finding more easy to implement. So we can go for the Python always over here, and we need to be very strong into the databases and the SQL part over here. So as a data engineer, we also need to collaborate with data scientists to build machine learning and analytics infrastructure from testing to deployment. So what exactly this statement says is, as a data engineer, I need to be more attached or communicated and in sync with the business use case owners, which are implementing the whole business use case. So once the data is available, so it might be the data scientist will be using that data. It might be we will be having some kind of a reports on analytical tool. So what kind of information these guys need? So our job is to provide them that kind of a data into the end, right? But as if they are not able to solve the business purpose, so there is no use of getting the data, like extracting and ETL and the pipelines and getting available the data to the data scientist and analytical team. So we need to be very in sync with them. So whatever is their requirement, we need to fulfill uh, with our data pipelines and get it done. So they can have their use case easily built on top of that. So what are the responsibilities? So the primary responsibility of a data engineer is ensuring that data is readily available, secure, and accessible to stakeholders when they need it. So the responsibility typically include is the building and maintaining the data infrastructure for the optimal extraction, transformation, and loading data from a wide variety of sources. So as we have talked about, we have different clouds like AWS, GCP. So at least we should be as a data engineer. we should be having knowledge of these services on the cloud. So ensuring data accessibility at all the times, implementing company data policies with respect to data privacy and confidentiality. So the policies of the data which are defined by the data architects. So we need to implement all of these things. And if we are seeing anything or we can contribute or suggest, so definitely we need to do that. And it's more kind of a responsibility to develop all of these things which are already defined with the help of data architects. So the wrangling of a data from primary and the secondary sources into the formats which are already defined in an efficient manner, right? So whenever you are writing a SQL or whenever you are writing some kind of a code between the data flow, you should make sure that you are having an efficient SQL query or you are writing an efficient Python code that will not like degrade the product performance. So you should be very like responsible, and you will be the owner of all these code and the sequels. So you need to be very effective in all of these areas. So collaborating with engineering team, data scientists, and other stakeholders. So collaborating between across the teams is always a common responsibility. Either we can say for the data architect or the engineer. So it's a common responsibility because you have some task and some other person, when you are done, some other person will be using that data. So you need to be very communicated. You need to be on same pages when you are building the things, because definitely you don't want to rework of the things. So everything should be defined properly, what you need to build and what exactly are your thoughts and what exactly you are going to build. So everything should be communicated in a nice fashion. So if you talk about what skills a data engineer should have, so data engineering is a synthesis of software engineering and data science. So knowledge of both field is a added advantage because data engineering is heavily reliant on programming. So nowadays, data engineer is very much heavily on the programming side. So definitely the SQL part is always there, but right now the data engineers needs to code, and that is a true statement. So most data engineers begin their career as a software engineer and they pivot to the data engineering. So as I have already discussed about my career journey. So I have also started with software engineering. Then I got a chance on big data. Then I have developed like my skills on the big data. Then I got a chance to work on the DevOps part as when we are building the data pipelines. So there were no DevOps engineers over there. So we have built the DevOps code for our product. So just like as an example, so there is a Terraform technique right now to the templates are there. So we just need to define to provision the services on the cloud. So, so these kind of a role are basically on the DevOps side. But as a, if project demand in that way, then definitely we need to work. So as part of our data engineering squad, so we need to automate all of these things. So we worked on the Terraform part. We defined the whole templates, how exactly service needs to provision. Then we wrote the whole Python codes for the data flow part. And that is how we acquire more knowledge, right? So apart from the SQL and the NoSQL part, having more strong knowledge on the SQL, these skills also needs to have in your bucket to be a proficient data engineer right now. So you should be having knowledge on the migration and the integrations and what are the different techniques on the data wrangling part. And as I have already talked more about the programming language. So from my side, the suggestion always be for the Python. So be very proficient on Python, and you should be aware about different services on the cloud and the distributed system, because if you are talking about the data flow, so we might be using the Linux and all those part as operating systems over here. And at least for the AWS part, I will suggest that at least we should be very proficient on AWS. We should be know what kind of services we have on the AWS, and where exactly we can use those services, and what are the use cases for these services, and how exactly we can program these services, right? It's not about going to the AWS console and provisioning them and like uploading or your code, and how exactly we can just do a kind of a small POCs. So it is more kind of a large use case. So AWS always provide those use cases. So how exactly other companies are using those services? So at least read. We need to read all kind of these white papers over there. Yeah. So as you talked about the data architect and the data engineering, so we'll just like review what we have discussed. So what are the basic difference? So data architect difference is more about the for formalizing the blueprint of the organization on the data part, and defining how exactly the security policies, the formats of the data, right? What will be the databases, and how exactly we're gonna consume then, the integration between the different services, or different between the tools, or if you want to develop different components, then how exactly those components will be interacting. Because when uh, you are having the whole data platform and the data flow, so there might be different devices the data is coming from. It might be different databases also from the data is coming. So you need to define the whole logic about these integration of the system. Uh, and on the right hand side, so it is more kind of a building the blocks what are already defined on the data engineering side. So on the data architect, we should be having the expertise into the data and the data modeling part. So on the right hand side, if we talk about the data engineer on the same aspect, so it will be more strong background in the software engineering. So how exactly you can implement the things, what kind of a algorithm if you need to write, you need to write, right? And the whole development knowledge. And again, on the left hand side of the data architect, it is more kind of a leadership and high level data strategy, and the high level vision of the data policies, what we want to develop. And it's more kind of a, on the right hand side, day-to-day task, like we need to automate all the data flow, in which there will be different stages. We need to clean, optimize the data, and like prepare the data, integrate the systems, and all those parts, so the other consumers can use this. Yeah. So how exactly like we have discussed about the architect part, the engineering part, their roles and responsibilities, what kind of skills we need to have. So we'll more talk about the conclusion. What exactly is the conclusion of data architect versus data engineer? So when choosing a career, like we need to make sure that the data architect role requires years of experience in a previous data related role. So both roles require like deep understanding of the database system, the engineering as well as the architect part, and the processing of the tool, and experience working with uh, the, the big data as well as with the data. So the data architect role is more about the experience on different use cases in the technology. For data engineering role, we should be having experience on the building software and the APIs, as well as the solid understanding of various databases, the SQL part, the different stages of the data, and the processing techniques. From where the data journey we can start. That is what the conclusion we want to make. So if you want to start into the data, so instead of the data architect positions, so definitely there are different certifications on the AWS for the architect part. Definitely we can target those things, but it will be good for us to start the journey from the different roles of the data engineering, the analytics, and all those parts. So we can have more experience and exposure on the different use cases. Then we can definitely like go on the ladder and have the data architects. Yeah. So as we will be moving to the closing of this data R session with the analytics Vidya. So we have 10 minutes, and we have like reserved the 10 minutes for the Q&A part. So yeah, it's open for if you have any questions.
So thank you for the wonderful session, sir. Remember, please use the Q&A section to ask questions, so it's easier to read them. And before that, though, we have put up another poll, and we'd like you to this one's about feedback, and we request you to answer it, the questions, please. Thanks. So you can go ahead with the questions there in the Q&A section.
Okay. Yeah. So I'll start from a question with the George. So I'll just read the question. So he was asking, can't imagine a data architect being responsible for all the security management, for instance, in a distributed or cluster data system, right? Or the all data integration at the edge. So mostly we are not talking about the data security management over here for the instances. So definitely that is the part of the job of an IT team in the company. So over here we are talking more about the data security, right? How exactly you are designing the system. If you have not designed your system to be secure enough, so I'll just take a very layman example over here. So we all know about the S3 buckets, right? And if we are having a common AWS, right, account for say suppose 2 or 3 clients what we have, and we are processing their data. Now the situation comes, we need to define the keys, right? We need to define the encryption, we need to define the access policies. So we are mostly talking about in that sense. We are not talking about the operating system vulnerabilities over here or some kind of a security which IT needs to be defined. Okay, I'll go move on to the next one. So the next one is from David. Architecture pattern is a logical way of categorizing data that will be stored on the database. Behavioral design patterns are concerned with algorithms and the assignment of responsibility between objects. In software engineering, behavioral design patterns are design patterns that identify common communication pattern amongst objects. I'm not sure what exactly is the question over here. So,
Sir, no, sir,
yeah.
it's in the Q&A section. Can I read them out?
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So the first one is,
okay,
do we have to learn
yeah.
PySpark as well to become a data engineer?
Yes, yeah, it's a more kind of a added, what I will say, added skill. Uh, so it will always good, and you can focus on the PySpark one.
Okay.
So what the
Next,
yeah.
next is roadmap to become a data engineer as a fresher.
So, what I will suggest is start learning the Python as well as like have the more strong knowledge on the SQL, and you can start with the cloud, or like having the knowledge on the cloud. So these three will be the important aspect to start for the data engineering.
So next one is how to distinguish between solution architect and data architect roles. Sometimes the roles are interchangeably used.
Yes, yes. So definitely, if you have the skills of like you have worked on the data part, right? So definitely, you can always go into the data architect part, and the solution architect is some kind what it's a more kind of a like the solution of the software engineering as well as it's more kind of a that role. But the data architect is always like defining the things on the data side. So that's what I can relate this question.
Okay. Next is the long one. Is a
Yeah.
data architect in an organization required to be specifically of data science or data engineering background, or can also come from an ERP, CRM, and BI background and advises on general analytics or dashboard design, implementation, and support roles?
Yeah. So I will not say the support role, but definitely it can come from the BI background and the analytics one. So it's more kind of a dashboard design. So it's a combination of the analytics, BI, and the dashboard one. So definitely we are not talking about the dashboard design as a UI one. So it's more about the data. So definitely if you have the experience on top of these skills, so you are already into the data path. So you can just upgrade your skills on the architect part, and you can just apply for those.
Okay. That's it for questions. We'll wait for just 1 more minute.
Sure, sure.
Okay, one more question. Are there any clear training of skill sets for data architect?
So see, it's more about the experience one and the role or the organization what you are applying. So if your organization using Azure or some kind of a cloud, right, or some kind of tools on the databases, it's more about the exposure what you have in your career path on these kind of a data skill set and the technology. So it's not about the clear training of a skill sets for a data architect. So you can always go on the different cloud and have the certificates and the different technologies. So it's you can have those things always. But it is if I go as a clear training, so there is nothing a clear training. It's all about the opportunities what you are getting, right? And you are what exactly the skills you are developing in your whole career path. So I'm just afraid of that word clear training. So that is why I have answered in that way.
So we have only like a few more minutes. So if you want to ask questions, now's the time. Yeah, I guess we're done. So thanks a lot again for the wonderful session. On behalf of Analytics Vidya, I'd like to thank you for your time and for delivering such a wonderful session. I'm sure our audience found it insightful, and hopefully we can conduct more such sessions with you in the future. I hope everybody has filled in the feedback poll. If not, I request you to please do it, as your feedback is valuable to us and to helps us to conduct more knowledgeable sessions. We'll be back with another session of the Data Hour tomorrow. The links of upcoming sessions are in the chat. And until then, take care, everyone.
Yeah, thank you.